Hey everyone, welcome back to the CareerMetis Podcast. And this is your host, Nissar Ahamed. And this is episode 100 of the CareerMetis Podcast. And yeah, we made it. It's been a little over 2 years and we finally made it to episode 100. And for today, I wanted to bring back as a guest who we have had in the past. And today we're going to speak about the topic of networking. Yes, this is part of the Networking Expert series. We've done a few episodes. And whether it's a job seeker, a freelancer, or a young professional, or an entrepreneur, it is something that really will have a huge impact, whether your career or business. And a lot of people do not really get it right. It's something most people struggle with, especially if you're an introvert like me. And there's a lot of advice on different, and sometimes it's the same advice on the internet over and over again. But I thought I'd bring back our guest because in my experience, I don't think anybody does it better than him. And we are welcoming back Larry Gioia. We had him at episode 71. In episode 71, we talked about his life. It was called A Day in the Life of an IT Solutions Architect. And today we're going to talk about something different. As I mentioned so far, the whole concept of networking, how you could do it better, how Larry does it so well, and so on. So I'm really excited. Not only it's because of episode 100, but it's also because I've got Larry back on the show. Hey, Larry, welcome back.
Hey, Nissar, thank you so much for having me. And congratulations, first and foremost, on number 100. That's a huge milestone. Congratulations to you and your audience. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a fun journey. One of the great benefits of being a podcast host is you get to have great conversations, meet new individuals such as yourself, and learn a lot. So the journey has been fun. And I appreciate your support in the journey as well.
Of course. Yeah, it's just the beginning. As I always like to say, I hope you think the same way. It's a perpetual beta. And 100 becomes 200, 300, and so on. So that's awesome. I'm really humbled to be back, and thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. I really like what you just said there. It's just the beginning. So Larry, I mean, for the audience who have not listened to episode 71, perhaps you can give us a quick introduction about yourself before I jump into the whole topic and the concept of what we're going to talk about. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So for those who want to go back to 71 and listen, Nissar, you and I talked about specifically my role as a technology consultant by day, but I do many different things and wear many different hats, just like many of your guests. But, I think at a macro level, Nissar, I think of myself with kind of three different lenses, not three different lenses, but what I kind of do for work and then kind of how I make it all mesh together. First and foremost is I'm a community builder, and that takes on many shapes and forms, but largely that comes by way of kind of building community or, spinning up communities around communities of interest. It'd be people who have a very specific interest in a certain topic. And I'm very keen on bringing those people together, either physically or in the digital world. So I really enjoy doing that. And I've done that in a few different capacities, which maybe we'll talk about tonight. So community building is one of the things I love to do. And then, underpinning all of that is a serial entrepreneur. I've done quite a few startups, many failures, but a few successes in the process. But a serial entrepreneur and really keen on, not just moving to the next thing, but really keen on getting my ideas, not just out of my head on paper and manifesting themselves in some body of knowledge or some businesses. And so I've done that a few times now. So, very excited to talk about entrepreneurship when the opportunity presents itself and help and mentor other young people in that capacity. And then my day job, as we kind of talked about in 71, as an executive advisor working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and helping very large organizations, executives, leaders in the technology space think about technology transformation, IT strategy. So that's kind of what I do for my day job. But at the end of the day, like you, very keen to learn from everyone around me and a connector just like you. And I think it's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I want to come back to a couple of things you mentioned, Larry, connector and community builder in a bit. I wanted to ask you this question, and you seem to have got it well. I mean, you do networking really, really well. And I haven't met you in person. We have spoken a few times, but you come across as someone who's gregarious, very cordial, someone is outgoing. So here's a question. Is that something that someone needs to be a good networker, or someone like, let's say someone, an introvert like me, can also be good at that?
Well, first of all, thanks for, passing judgment in a good way with such great adjectives. I really appreciate that.
No, it was,
Even though we haven't
it was
met.
a praise, not a judgment.
No, you know what I mean. So absolutely. So I appreciate that. And I think that it's probably a testament to the fact that, you are a keen observer of good judge of character, as it were. So I like to think I am all those things. So thanks for that. Your question around, so does one have to be gregarious and outgoing and, charismatic, all the things? Look, I think actually, you don't have to be an extrovert. I am definitely on Myers-Briggs ENS or ENTJ, I think I am. Suffice to say, you don't have to be an extrovert to be a great networker. I think is really, really important. I think there's a big misconception that I'm an introvert, so I couldn't possibly go talk to people, or, I'm totally drained. The idea of going into a room of people and being able to talk to them is just completely foreign to me. Now, by way of, characteristics, yes, that is probably in fact the case, but a long-winded kind of overarching underlying thesis here is to say that you do not have to be an extrovert to be a great networker. And quite frankly, we can talk a little bit about the word itself. Networking, I think, has a bit of a misnomer to it as well, because what I like to say, Nissar, is aside from what your, typification is as a human being, you are a human first, right? And I think the two qualities that make the best the best connectors, as it were, if you have a heart beating in your chest and you have a brain in your head, you have the two key ingredients to be a great connector or networker, as it were. And everybody has those. So in my mind, everyone's a great networker. Everyone's a great connector. You just have to figure out how best to utilize those two assets.
Oh, that's great, Larry. And I wanted to come back to this because you mentioned this a few times, because you don't see networking as networking. You look at it as connecting. And you mentioned the word connector over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's exactly who you are. I've had a few guests on my show because of the introductions you have made. You are a great connector. So you look at networking totally different, because in traditional sense, let's say, this podcast is about job search and career advice, and people are advised to go out and seek others so they can connect and learn. But you, on the other hand, are talking about be a connector. And when you think of the word connector, it's totally different interpretation. And I'm really curious to learn more. I was wondering if you can expand on that.
Yeah, sure. And so let's go a bit pedantic here, right? So, networking, as I think many of your listeners are probably familiar with, regardless if you've been in an industry for quite some time, regardless of what industry you've been in, there's an association to networking that is, you kind of maybe cliche, but you think about, going to a place where, we are there to network. We are there to meet other people, and it's, maybe in a confined space, maybe it's over drinks. You're bringing a stack of business cards. The things that typically come to mind from a networking kind of event or networking experience, right? And in my mind, so I've been to those. I know you've probably been to those as well. And, even as an introvert, those just like throw up huge red flags. At least they do it even to me as an extrovert. It's like, that's like very transactional, right? It feels like I'm going to go there and I'm going to meet some really interesting people perhaps, but it's going to be like a very finite amount of time. I'm going to throw away some business cards, and I never go deeper. I never get deeper than like, hey, I'm Larry. What do you do? How long have you been doing what you do? How can you help me? Right? And that's really, really the differentiator between networking and connecting. Those are the things that I associate with networking, right? And right or wrong, I'd love your perspective on that as well. But connecting, really as the word implies, is to go to the next level of detail and actually establish a human relationship. So I've said this before in a couple of different, capacities, but I see networking as to a transaction, and connecting is to relationships, right? And so, yes, you're building relationships when networking, but it's really taking the time to get to know the person for who they actually are. I like to say that, networking, you start the conversation with, what do you do? Whereas when you're connecting, you're asking questions like, so who are you? Where are you from? What's your superpower? That's something that's a much different conversation where I get to know who you are as opposed to what you do. So that's kind of how I think about the differentiation, and we can even go deeper on that if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And before you expand on that, I just wanted to highlight, if I can highlight the word you mentioned, is relationships. Because You're totally correct. I've been to events, Chamber of Commerce or networking, so-called networking events, and most of them is like exchanging business cards is transactional, and then it's mostly a sales pitch. But you mentioned connection as like connector is human relationships. It's all about relationship building. And yeah, I would love for you to expand on that, but I just want to make sure people get that piece.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, when I think about, connecting, networking, use whatever vernacular you want to use. What's really critical, at least from what I've found that works for me, and, I'm coming to realize very quickly that it's working for others as well, is that, relationships is everything we do. If that's in your personal life, if that's in your professional life, if that's in your, the mix between the two, the integration of work and life, it comes down to relationships, right? And I like to say, I kind of coined this phrase a while back, and I'll say it slowly because it's a bit of a tongue twister, okay? In networking, there's this adage, it's about who you know, right? So, I know so-and-so, and he or she is going to help me get to somebody else, right? And that's very transactional.
Uh-huh.
When I think about connecting and taking it another next level of detail, it's not about who you know. It's about who you know, who knows who you need to know, okay? And it's a bit of a tongue twister if you get your head around that. It's not about who you know. It's about who you know, who knows who you need to know. And if you think about that, that comes from a place of relationships, because when someone actually knows you, and I'll kind of, we'll get into kind of narrating others and what that actually means, but Nissar, I've never met you in person. You live in Toronto, live in Pittsburgh, but I feel as though I actually know you well enough. Mm-hmm. I know what you're about. I know, as you kind of know some of the characteristics about me, I have a pretty good handle on what you do and why you do what you do. And I feel very good about getting people in touch with you because I think you're doing really great stuff. And I want people to know you because you believe in, you have a purpose for what you do, right? So now it's a function of, hey, I have 100 people that, you could know through me, but I actually know people who should know you because I know who you are. So there's a lot of who's in there. Long and short is it's going the next level deeper and actually connecting people for their why and their purpose, not just because you know them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing. Whenever you say something, I write down something that I need to repeat. And what he just mentioned is, what you just mentioned, Larry, is amazing. Who you know. It's not about who you know. It's about who knows who you need to know. And it's called, the 6 pixels of separation where you can get to connect. That's the whole, I think I forgot who wrote it, but that's actually a good analogy and that's exactly what we have done here as well. Because when I interviewed you, I asked you, do you know someone else? And you have connected me with a couple of other individuals for a day in the life of series. So those have been great. So, that's exactly a different way of connecting with individuals, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly right. The beauty of the relationship that you and I have established and, the folks who I have sent your way and the folks you sent my way, that's not networking at all. We are merely connecting the dots, as it were, proverbially, because we really believe in each other and we want to add value to each other, right? And what's really, really important in this world of connecting is if you put away the transaction for a side, the transaction typically has an association that I'm expecting something in return, right? In terms of, hey, I'm going to introduce Nissar to 5 podcast guests. And when I take a networking mentality, I'm going to hey, I'm going to file that one away. And every time I need something, I'm like, hey, Nissar, remember that one time I, hooked you up with so-and-so? When you're connecting, I'm really coming from a place of, I just want to get the best people on your podcast because I really believe in what you're doing and adding value to you to the extent that I can with expecting nothing in return. And I get really excited about doing that. And quite frankly, I think you and I have the relationship that we do, having never met, because we both approach it with a value add, giving first mentality. I'm not sure. I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, that is so true, because after I learned this concept of ABCD, we will talk about in a bit, it actually got me inspired because I interviewed Aaron Watson, then he connected you with me, then I've had a few more connections. Now, whenever I have a chance, I've got into the habit. I've interviewed other career coaches and I say, you know what, I know other career coaches because we have interviewed each other. You guys should talk. And when they have an interview and I see this on my feed, I get excited even though I had nothing to gain from that, it just feels good. It's actually great. It's a great feeling when you, how do you say it, without expecting anything, you are connecting individuals, you're helping them. That itself is an amazing sense of satisfaction, even when I don't get anything monetary from it.
That's exactly right, Nissar, is it doesn't have to be, quid pro quo, like I'm going to get another guest out of this, or, I'm going to get the thing or the job offer or the interview. At the end of the day, it will come back to you in whatever manifestation you want it to. That's a bit conceptual and a bit ethereal, but in your case, it's the satisfaction of knowing that you had a hand in making that other interview happen. In somebody else's case, it might come by way of maybe a referral, or it might come by way of a gift or a thank you note. Whatever that is, that kind of reciprocation comes in many different forms. It doesn't need to be the tangible thing or the immediate gratification. And I think that's one of the things that people really get stuck on, is that there's some expectation of something in return. And when you can truly get your head out of this mentality of expecting something, it opens a whole new world to connecting, to relationships, to approaching even problems and work differently. Like you, Nissar, I have a lot of fun doing that. And it just keeps snowballing because, I expect nothing, but I get so much out of the relationships that I've established over the years, and just, living and breathing this world of ABCD, always be connecting the dots.
All right. You and I have mentioned ABCD a few times. So we have let the cat out of the bag here. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about ABCD, because that's something that you have introduced to me. And yeah, could you tell me how you came up with that and what exactly it is? What are some of the benefits you have seen other than what you've just mentioned?
Yeah, so I didn't mean to take us off track, but I think we're riffing pretty well together here. Underpinning all the concepts that I think we've been talking about for the past 10 minutes or so, I kind of encapsulate into 4 letters, a very simple acronym that, quite frankly, I think anybody could remember. The first 4 letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, and the acronym stands for always be connecting the dots. Always be connecting the dots, right? And so, where this came from, truly it wasn't like an epiphany I had one day and I said, oh, A, B, C, D. Literally, it kind of just somewhat came to me kind of through, my work and through the networking that I was, historically doing. And I said, how can we encapsulate all the things we're talking about here and think differently on all the things we're talking about, Nissar, as a kind of pithy but simple way to remind ourselves, and as a mantra that maybe someone reminds themselves of or continues to impress upon the people, ABCD. So that's something that I kind of, dreamt up one morning and it stuck with me. And I've been not professing that, but I try to share that ethos of connecting dots any opportunity I get. I think what's really important here, Nissar, is, we could talk about connecting dots in the context of people, in the context of networking, right? And relationships, but it's even bigger than that, right? Because, the adage of connecting the dots is nothing that I invented by any means. It goes back to like the 1400s with Da Vinci, right? And connecting different aspects of the universe, right? But at the end of the day, this notion of connecting dots is about people and things and concepts. And this notion that I've been fascinated with over the years of polymaths, folks like Da Vinci and Elon Musk and other polymaths, Gary Vaynerchuk, you can probably name a few others who really aren't like stuck in one thing. They're really good at seeing the bigger picture, and they're really good at connecting dots, A, B, C, D, right? I'm definitely not at that level, right? But I like to think of myself as someone who, as I started the conversation with, is in perpetual beta, is continually evolving my own thinking around what could be connected to what, who should be connected to who, and going out of my way to at least explore what should be connected and who should be connected, and trying to just make those things happen to the extent that I can make them happen. And so that was a bit of a circuitous, long-winded answer for ABCD, always be connecting the dots, is about seeing the bigger picture, looking at everything around you, realizing it's all connected somehow, and more often than not, you can be the person to make that happen. And that's where innovation happens. That's where relationships happen. That's where companies are built. There's a lot of things that happen when you can think and see the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's actually so true. And you mentioned some great names, and I just thought I should mention this as well because I'm a history buff. A totally different side note. And in a few days, it's July 1st, Canada Day, and July 4th, the 4th of July in the US. And if you go back in history, one other person I can think of is Samuel Adams. He was a lot of people do not know, but he was one of those great connectors back in the day who was really responsible in some ways to connecting everyone, very instrumental. And a lot of young people do not know who that is. Everybody knows George Washington. And the whole concept of connecting, right? The people then did not have any underlying motive. They just wanted to do the right thing. And there we go. After 300 plus years, you have a country, lots of change. The world is different.
That's right. Yeah. So nothing we're suggesting here, Nissar, I suggest is anything new. I think we're kind of just reframing and repackaging what those before us have been professing or, touting as the way to live, which is to be a connector. And you're right. And there are a ton of others too, right? Paul Revere and all the others around how do we build community? How do we bring people together? How do we bring ideas together to move things forward? Absolutely.
You're right. I just to repeat what he just said. Yes, there's not, others have done this, but what you have done, Larry, is brilliant. You've made it very simple for anyone to understand. ABC. It can't get any more simpler than ABCD.
A second grader could remember this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of this because it is so simple. The reason I mentioned this a few times is because it is so simple and it doesn't take a lot. And it comes from, it's a selfless act and you're helping and connecting. And even though you're not expecting anything, it does come back many folds in different ways. So that's the way I see it. And that's the way it does work for me. I got introduced to this concept a while back, not so long ago, actually, a few months ago. And I've just doing this, it's a great feeling of satisfaction.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, maybe if we kind of go towards the end of this, we can talk about some tactics. At any point you want to talk about some tactics to consider, or even just trying this, right? It is a stretch for some folks because we all kind of come at this from different angles. But, it definitely takes some practice. And it's like it's a hard thing to do, but it definitely takes a mindset shift to think a little differently about how you approach relationships with this notion of nothing in return or feeling of being let down where nothing comes back and reciprocates even in real time, right? So I think one of the things that, when I talk to young people, when we live in a digital world as we live in now, there's this, desire for immediate gratification. And I'm younger, right? In terms of, I'm kind of on that bubble of the millennial kind of generation, but not a millennial myself. But this world of instant gratification from a digital means, maybe that adding value and connecting is, a referral on LinkedIn or a recommendation on LinkedIn, for example, kind of talking in more of a digital terms. What's interesting to me is I look at the tools and technologies we have today, and it's like, hey, you should consider recommending Nissar so that he can, give you a recommendation or endorse you for some skills. And that's just so counter. I think what I'm saying is that this even shows up in the tools and technologies that we see today from an instant gratification perspective. And I think it's backwards. And we have to remove ourselves from that mentality to truly get into the world of being a connector.
Yeah. And I mean, it'd be nice if you can expand on that. And you said some tactics. What are some of the tactics that you could recommend? Yeah.
So, we'll kind of come back to, our mutual friend and Aaron Watson, another podcaster. I was on his podcast almost a year ago now. We actually talked about a similar concept. And, he asked me, pretty point blank, he says, what's one thing that someone listening to this concept could do right now and just act on and just try as an experiment, right? And so, one of the tactics, and I've since evolved it. So the thing that I shared with Aaron, and I'll share with your listeners, and I'll share the next evolution of that, is identify 7 people that in your network, either your network or that you have, you're close enough to, and then identify 7 more people who you want to introduce each one of those people to, right? For nothing more than to say, hey, here's 7 humans that I believe in. I believe in their purpose. I think they're great people. And then just very simply identify 7 other people who you think each one of them should know, right? And it's very simple. It's very straightforward as a way to just kind of get the ABCD mindset going, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And, I'm also a believer in that if you don't write it down or put it on paper, it becomes too conceptual, too ethereal, and you'll never act on it, right? And so taking that one step further, I'm toying with this idea, not to make this so structured, but I kind of refer to this kind of as the connector's blueprint, all right? And it kind of goes like this. It takes that one step further. So I'm going to describe it, and then we can kind of come back and review it, right? So essentially, the connector's blueprint sounds something like this. You take a piece of paper, and you turn on 8.5 by 11, wherever you are in the world, whatever the size paper you got, you turn it on its side so it's sideways, and you draw 4 columns, okay? And that first column, you're going to make a list of names. It's 5 to 10 names. Doesn't have to be any more than maybe even 5. And in that column, these are people you would like to meet. Look, you could even be so bold and so out there to say, hey, I want to meet Elon Musk, or I want to meet Gary Vee, or I want to whoever. Ideally, these are people that are realistically you could possibly meet. All right, that's column 1. Column 1 is who do I want to meet? Column 2 is who do you feel most comfortable narrating? And when I say narrating, these are people that, similar to my last example, these are people that I feel really good about. I could talk about what they do. I could talk about who they are. I could talk about, what they do and why I feel good about them, right? So 5 people that you feel good that you could narrate and you could kind of give a pitch for. That's column number 2. Mm-hmm. Column number 3, okay, is for each name that you wrote down in column 2, you put someone who comes to mind immediately that you think could benefit from that person, right? So example, column number 2, I put Nissar. Column number 3, I'm already thinking about podcasts. I'm thinking about life coaches. I'm thinking about executive coaches who I think could benefit from the value, the expertise that you bring. That's one person, 1 for 1, okay? The 4th and final column is, why did you put that name there? Why did you put the name in column 3 next to the one in column 2, all right? Now what you have in front of you, I've outlined this, it may be a bit confusing, but if you do this, column 1, who do you want to meet? Column 2, 2 to 5 or 5 to 10 people that you feel comfortable narrating. Column 3, a name for each one of those in column 2. Column 4, why did you put it there? What you now have in front of you is the blueprint to go and make those connections happen immediately, right? You take the name in column 2, you actually send a quick email or a text, introduce the person in column 3, and you already have the why this person should meet, right? That blueprint becomes, like, you have 10 people right now that you can immediately make a connection with without talking about what they do, without, getting into business cards, all those kind of things. And then, oh, by the way, you're like, what's column 1 all about? Column 1 is for you to save for when someone comes back to you, it reciprocates back to you, and they're like, hey, what can I do for you? That's when you bring out column 1 and you say, actually, you can help me. I'm trying to get connected with these 5 people. That's when the magic happens, right? So that's kind of my 4-column connectors blueprint at a glance. And maybe we can even draw that out somehow and put it on your show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make that as an effort. I'll create a file or an image and put that in the show notes so people can visualize. But that's brilliant. The connectors blueprint. When I asked you to come on episode 100, I knew it was not going to be ordinary. It was going to be extraordinary. I think you have blown that out of proportion by these 2 laws. The rule of 7 and the connectors blueprint. That's amazing.
No, I appreciate that. And I apologize. It's always very narrative. And I'd love to be able to get a visual of that so people can, visualize it. And if they have questions, they can reach out to you, reach out to me. I'd be happy to follow up and talk more about that as well.
Yeah. And before we move on to the next point, I just want to just give a call to action to the audience or anyone listening to this. You mentioned 7. Of course, now when this episode is live, it is in July, month number 7. So, Larry's rule of 7, month number 7. So I encourage all of you to follow the rule of 7. Find 7 people, find 7 more people who you think they should connect with, and make the introduction. And we have talked about the benefits of what you will see. So that's a call to action to the audience, myself included as well. And I'm looking forward to doing it. Larry, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, you mentioned the word community builder twice. I think, and that's a different level of network connection. I don't want to use the word networking here. But that's a different level. That's going beyond a connector. Connector is connecting person A to person B. Community is building community. And if you look at the most successful people in the world, successful businesses like Facebook, Google, they build communities. They build communities of different. So you mentioned the word community builder. I think you have a shout out to your Facebook group. You have a group that you run as well. please let us know what it is. I'll make sure to mention that in the show notes as well. Why did you bring, I'm just curious, like, can you tell us more? I'm really itching to know.
Yeah, sure. So we'll give a couple examples. And, it's not I guess it's a self-described community builder, as it were. I don't see that as a title. I think it's, you hit it right on the head, Nissar, is, when I look at leadership and I look at the best leaders, we can have all the adjectives that I think make great leaders. They're influencers, they're great listeners, they're community builders, right? And the community can take on many different forms, right? And so let's go to one extreme, which is, Mark Zuckerberg building the largest community in the digital world using Facebook. And now obviously you got a ton of other things that kind of followed suit. And that's bringing people together for a common good of, social interaction, social entrepreneurship, whatever it is, right? And so when I look at the best leaders of all the things we talk about, they are all about bringing people together. And that could be around rallying people around, again, a common cause. That can be around, bringing people together to share in some capacity. Whatever it might be, there's this through line of people building community. So it could be a physical manifestation of something. It could be a technology. It can be like, hey, you just organize meetups because you want to get people together who are like-minded or diversity of thought. You just orchestrate that. You're a community builder, right? I think at the end of the day, everyone's a community builder. It's just to the degree to which you elect to amplify that reach, right? So Mark Zuckerberg's one extreme. I think people on like meetup.com, they're community builders, right? They're like getting people together who like love underwater basket weaving. That's fine. Like two people show up for that. That's cool. You're a community builder. At the end of the day, when I see that characteristic, I'm like, not so much I want to do that, but one of the things that comes naturally to me is this desire to bring people together and to share a common space. And we've done that in a couple of ways. So you mentioned this Facebook group, which is truly an experiment that Aaron Watson, we said his name a couple of times now, that he and I have curated, called Connection University. Go figure. Connection University, not Networking University, with nothing more than an experiment it's open to everybody, right? You can be wherever you are in the world, have to have Facebook in this case, as an experiment to see, how and where do people exchange value by, they want something or need something or want to connect with somebody. And you would be amazed at the people that rally around wanting to help others and say, hey, I can help you do that, or I've got X, or I've got X resources, you should talk to Y. Getting back to the who knows who, right? This experiment has taken on a life of its own. And for folks who want to kind of join this group, it's an open group on Facebook. The discourse runs everything from I'm an entrepreneur and I'm looking to get legal advice, all the way through to, we had someone on there who was doing a research on air pollution and was looking to find an expert somewhere in the world. And lo and behold, someone in the community actually knew. So I'll share that with you as an example, a manifestation of community building, coming full circle back to why do we connect? Because we get a ton of just inherent value out of that. I take no credit for that community. That has become what it is because of the people in it. We were nothing more than the instigators, right? We put the kernel out there, and just like, let's use Zuckerberg again, like it's Facebook and Instagram and other things. They put the kernel out there, and it became what it became because of not just the idea, but the groundswell of people truly coming together, either sharing points of view or opinions, whatever, right? That's one example of a digital community that I've been very keen on kind of continuing to nurture and seeing where it goes. Another community, this is pretty niche, right? I outside of my day job, I have a very keen interest in building community around adaptive sports specifically. So I won't go too deep into this, but lo and behold, what I found here in where I live in Pittsburgh, there's a lot happening in the world of adaptive sports. And for those who may not know, that these are essentially all sports for people with disabilities specifically, okay? Every, major sport or athletic, whatever it might be, there is an equivalent for someone with disability. And what I've come to learn through my own, just not just interest in sports, is, there was a lot happening in this community, in the community that already existed. It was very fragmented, and no one really was talking to each other. And it felt like a community could be established, or a consortium could be established, so that they could all move forward together and truly impact the people who needed these services the most. Okay. Long and the short is that we identified that. I said, hey, we could really have much more impact here because it's a bunch of small nonprofits. What if we actually put a consortium around all of this stuff, not to oversee it all, but to really kind of serve as this body of consortium. And lo and behold, now here we are 2 years later, and all of these organizations are moving together in mass and serving, 10 times as many, people, which is pretty awesome. Again, a kernel of an idea. It wasn't me, but it was the community that pulled it all together. So there's 2 examples of community, both in digital world and in the physical world, but all started with this common thread of bringing people together for a common interest, right?
So the natural question I want to ask is, let's say someone gets inspired by this, or someone is still trying to understand the value they can get from themselves. So let's say someone looks at this, they really want to get good at this, and they want to build a community. What would you say are the benefits they would experience when they do what you have done with Connection University and your other business as well?
Yeah. So, I think the immediate, the immediate kind of, satisfaction, regardless of what you're doing, whatever the domain actually is, right? If it's adaptive sports, if it's basket weaving, it's whatever. The fact that someone is willing to show up and take time out of their day to come to a physical place when, let's say, you say, hey, I want to bring everyone who's interested in this topic together and they just want to have coffee and chat about it. The fact that someone actually took the time out of their day to show up and actually listen to either what you have to say or see who else is there is immediate validation, not just of your idea, but someone else is interested, right? And so there's that, there's that, which is to me, is one point of validation, but also a sense of purpose, right? In terms of, hey, I'm not the only one who has this desire to build community, right? Mm-hmm. I think secondarily is, and oh, by the way, naturally, maybe because it's hand in glove with what we're talking about, you get to see, you immediately get the instant connected, you instantly get connected with the people who are thinking like you or thinking differently about the topic at hand. Those become your people. Those become your tribe, right? That becomes a tribe of people who you want to spend more time with. You want to, bounce ideas off of. That's that to me is the return. The return is immediate connection, right? Because they're clearly there for a reason. You start asking the question, why? Hey, nice to meet you. Why are you here exactly? That's connection happening, right? It's connection in real time. It's the gratification that somebody else actually took the time to show up. That begins to get the ball rolling with the topic we've been chatting about for the past, 45 minutes, which is, that's connection. Connections in community, right? And if you can facilitate that, that becomes the catalyst for what I think is, quite frankly, one of the most rewarding roles, life skills, leadership skills that everybody should continue and have a desire to build.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Larry, unfortunately, have come to the end of our recording, and I know I personally can speak for more time, but there's a lot of great ideas here. Once again, on behalf of the audience, myself, thanks for coming back as a guest. It's been a great interview.
No, thank you. And truly humbled again, Nissar, to be number 100 for you. And I look forward to hearing it. And I look forward to engaging with your community that you've been building with CareerMetis and engaging with them. And again, I have an open door to helping your listeners in any way I can connect the dots.
Thank you once again, Larry.
Thanks, Nissar.
Thanks, folks, for listening to yet another episode 100 of the CareerMetis Podcast. As mentioned during the interview, I've written a brief summary as part of a show notes in addition to this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode, learned something new, feel free to post a comment or review. And if you really, really loved it, definitely go ahead and share this amongst your network. Until next time, this is your host, Nissar Ahamed. Thank you.